Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
This is Josh Benson. Welcome back to There's No Business Like. This week we are jumping into another episode of our Under the Radar series. In this interview, Kevin and I sit down with Amanda Cooper, who is the producer on Sunny Jain's Love Force in the Under the Radar Festival. We hear about her background and a little bit of her process and in working with Sunny Jain on this project. We hope you enjoyed this episode in the Under the Radar series of There's No Business Like.
Hi, I'm Amanda Cooper, and I have a company called ALC Arts, and I am an independent producer and consultant in this arts field.
Excellent. Well, Amanda, thank you for taking the time to sit down today with Josh and I. I just want to sort of frame the conversation that we're sitting here at the Sheraton in New York, and we are talking about sort of mostly focusing on Love Force, the Sunny Jain show that you produced, and it was part of the Under the Radar Festival that we are going to be talking to a few people about and just talk about that. So before we dive into all of that, I want to talk a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about Amanda, and specifically, how did you get into the arts?
Great. Okay, so I went to school in New York City. I thought I was going to, when I say school, I mean college. And when I thought I was going to major in business and psychology, I thought maybe I had this independent study school I was going to, but I was always doing theater on the side. And at the end of high school, I did the student-directed festival at my high school and just loved it and thought, maybe I'll just also keep doing some of this. So then when I got to college, that part of my work kept growing. And then I was fortunate enough going to school in New York City where I could easily, at the same time as doing classes, do internships. And I started doing these administrative internships, and I loved it. I was valued, and I was pretty good at it. And I realized that I could support the arts in this way that was fulfilling and also had that business element to it as well.
And so you talked about, and you were producing a festival in high school. How did you get into that?
That was music. I think a lot of high schools, and I guess I just made that assumption, have something called a student-directed festival where you get to direct a piece and get to try out. So I directed My Name is Alice, which is like a show from the 80s, I want to say, 80s or 90s. And it was really fun, and I just fell in love with directing and thinking about things in that way. Because I was always not the best actress, but I was okay. I could be in some things, but I loved the theater world more than the being on stage myself.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so then when I finished college, I got offered some jobs, and I kind of kept going. My very first job, actually, that I really got offered was at Symphony Space, which we'll come to later. That was amazing, and then it became a full-time job, and then I kind of just kept going on this career of doing what I call multidisciplinary arts producing.
Excellent. And what was the initial job at Symphony Space?
It was so at the time, I think it was called the assistant in the music, dance, and family department. And it was family programs, music programs, and dance programs, exactly what you'd think. And we would have maybe 30 to 40 shows a year. There were 3 of us in the department at the time. Lots of different fun stuff. I got exposed to a lot of different music, which I didn't know that much about before. A lot of dance, which I only knew a little bit about, because my main experience before had actually been more in theater. And then the family, which is all of the above. Yeah. Excellent.
And so what about, doing those things at Symphony Space and other jobs led you to starting your business?
My own company. Yeah, great. So I after Symphony Space, I had a handful of other things I did, but it was always within this nonprofit realm. I worked for a contemporary music festival for a little while. I freelanced doing a high school theater magazine and some other things. And then I actually started off as the company manager for Meredith Monk. And I did that for a few years. And doing that, I was touring for the first time. And so I was like signing the contracts, working with the agents, working with Meredith in the company, and also like learning what it meant to go on the road and learning what it meant to be in someone else's venue and seeing everything from that perspective. And that was awesome, but not like totally right for me. You know, when you tour and you talk to people, they think it's like so exciting, and you're like,
to go to all these cities.
Yeah, and you're like, I maybe get like one meal where I get to choose where I'm going, and you know, or like an afternoon. It's like not like that. But it was an amazing experience, and then I wanted to go back to being able to be in my own home, you know, to host people. So I became the general manager at a place called Here Art Center, which is in the Under the Radar Festival this year and has been in the past too. And that was a way I really got exposure to a lot more artists, both in terms of the folks who are renting the space. Here's known for being producers and partners on multidisciplinary works. So that's really their niche, and I think will still stay their niche because there's been a big leadership transition there. And so as the general manager, I was doing all the things, you know, whatever anyone else was not doing. And that's actually where I started using this phrase during meet and greets. And now whether they're Zoom meet and greets or in person, or when I introduce myself and say what my role is, I always say, if you don't know who to ask a question to, you can ask me, and either I have the answer or I will point you in the right direction or find out the answer. And that's a lot of what producing in general is really like. It's all the stuff that's not somebody else's job, and making sure that everything, that the ship keeps going forward, right? And in the right direction as much as possible. Like you are, I don't like saying you're steering the ship, because hopefully, like, especially in my world, the artist is really the one steering the ship, but you are doing everything you can to support that process.
Excellent.
Did I answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to remember. Oh, wait. But then I decided leaving here, I was seeing all of these projects that I was loving and wanted to have a future life. And at the same time, starting to think about, am I going to have a family? Like, how am I going to balance my work life? And my spouse is a musician and has a erratic schedule, all of these things, and realized that maybe what was right was combining all these different things and trying to help folks take their shows on the road. And that a lot of these artists who were ready for that type of thing didn't have a support structure in place, or a nonprofit or a for-profit that they, you know, had that support staff already. So maybe that I could use all the skills that I had to help them do that.
Perfect. That sort of transitions right into where I wanted to go into, because I'm curious, you know, when people talk about producing, you know, obviously like it's because they're associated with the current project. Yeah. So how do you find your next project or projects? You know, how do you find that artist that needs that, or how do they find you?
So through all those different jobs, I've met a lot of people in New York and beyond. And so I've been really fortunate that generally it's folks reaching out to me. So when I left here, I, you know, sent out a big note saying, this is what I'm doing. I approached a handful of folks that I'd worked with a bit. And then I was also doing what we'll call line producing. So for a while, and I still sometimes do this, but don't quite have the time anymore, where you're like a producer for hire for an artist project. But in a similar model where it's like an individual artist or a small company who needs a ringer to come in and really like usher something to fruition. There were a handful that I reached out to in the beginning, but then it was really about folks coming to me and then seeing if it was the right fit. And over the last number of years, although of course there were a lot of like stops and starts between having a kid, taking some time off there, and the pandemic really like the pandemic for what I do and everything really felt like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So then over the years, I really honed in and realized like to do what I do, which is be in this liminal space, right? And don't have acts. I don't have tribute bands. I'm not just doing dance. I'm not just doing theater projects. So now what I really say is what I focus on is multidisciplinary, accessible new works that are mission driven, or sometimes I say socially relevant. But that's my lane. And I think that that's a clear message for people to understand where everything fits. And also sometimes it's really helpful. I'll just say when people reach out to me and I'm like, you're not a fit because you're just a jazz, and I don't mean just, but like you're a concert or you're a straight theater piece. And I also say to a lot of folks, like the difference between something, especially in theater, that should tour versus just go to different regional theaters is, are the people that you are working with so singular and individual that they're the ones that need to bring this story on the road, right? And Love Force is a perfect example of that, of course. Like no one else but Sunny and his band are going to do that show. You might sometimes be able to have a sub in, but like, it's not the type of thing where someone's written a play and they're like, oh, my company wants to tour this play. It's like, but that's not going to be for me if there's not a reason why it has to be that specific company taking that show everywhere. And maybe actually you should think about finding the local companies who put up your play.
Yeah, you've created a really good mission there, like the way that you described it, because in that description, I mean, I can see exactly why Sunny Jain was a part. Why you helped produce that.
Totally.
So I want to save Sunny Jain towards the end of our conversation because there's a lot of things that I want to talk about for that. So Sunny Jain was at Symphony Space here in New York City, and it was part of the Under the Radar Festival. If you feel comfortable, can you explain to maybe somebody who hasn't been a part of the Under the Radar Festival or hasn't even heard of it, like what it is?
Yeah, I can try. I mean, I am someone who's gone to the Under the Radar Festival for 21 years. I think almost every year I've gone to at least something.
That's great.
And I'll also just say that Mark Russell, who started the Under the Radar Festival, was the artistic director at a place called Ep.190, which was one of my first internships.
Oh, wow.
So I was like 20 years old hanging out in Ep.190 and typing on a computer email addresses or different things while sometimes hearing Mark have phone conversations with folks above me. And when I say above me, they literally had offices that were like 2 floors because downtown theater, especially 20 something years ago, was crazy how they use spaces. Now you have to be a little more up to code. So also having known Mark, I used to go to Ep.190 a lot, and which is now called Symphony Space New York. And so yes, for 21 years I've been going to Under the Radar. So and that, I think the phrase, the name of it makes a lot of sense for what it is. The idea is it's stuff that is not on most people's radar. It's not getting that type of attention. It probably also won't ever go to Broadway, right? It might not even ever go to off-Broadway. But if all the pieces align, maybe it would. But it's things that, and a lot of that it's an undercurrent, I would say, of what's happening in the live performing arts. And sometimes those undercurrents, right, in 5 years, will start to rise more to the surface, whether it's the topic or that particular artist or things like that. There was something today earlier at the, maybe that Mark Pamuti Joseph said, or that made me start thinking about this idea of like experimental to commercial, and thinking in my head, like, what are the things that fit more into the world that I'm in that become commercial? And there's very few, but they happen, right? And then they also, like something like Hamilton's a perfect example. You know, what Lin-Manuel was doing in that show, you would have never thought would have been something commercial, but when all of the stars and pieces align, you get this beautiful thing, and now it's inspiring all these other people who maybe would have never done theater before and to think of things in a new way. Yeah.
So how long have you been producing something in the Under the Radar Festival, or is this your first foray into it?
I think this is the first time I've independently produced it. When I was at Here Art Center, we had a couple of shows at Under the Radar Festival. There was a show that I can't remember the name of, that was because I literally had just started there like a week before, but we had some show, was some small, I think it was only 30 people at a time. I remember you had to take off your shoes. I don't remember much else from it. It was two men from an Eastern European country. And then a couple years later, we had the show called Chimera, which was by Deborah Stein and Sully Holm, who later created a company called Stein Holm. And actually, when I left here, they were one of the first companies that I worked for, and I helped them. We did a tour called The Wholehearted for a number of years. So I know that there's that, and so I was quite involved with that show. But since, gosh, I don't think that there was a show that I was involved in this way. But also Under the Radar has changed. It used to be majority under the Public Theater, and it was produced by the Public Theater. Mark and at least one other producer was an employee there. And then with budget cuts, that went away. And so now really Under the Radar is like an umbrella that embraces a bunch of different organizations who all work with Mark and Merope and Kinesa and Archetype to create this festival of exciting new work that is Under the Radar. And it gets put together and packaged in this way to get people to pay attention to more than one thing. So also, like, if you're used to going to La Mama, if you're someone who goes there, and maybe you don't tend to go to other experimental venues, maybe for Under the Radar, when you get that brochure, you'll look and say, oh, let me try also going up to Symphony Space. Or, oh, hey, this place Theater Me Too, what is that? Oh, it's actually near where I live in Gowanus. Let me go check it out. So.
And what do you think its purpose in the in New York City or sort of like the larger industry is?
Well, certainly for the timing of when it's at, and it really, I think, jump started from everything I understand, this concept of Jan Arts NYC, that like Under the Radar really came first here during APAP, and then these other festivals joined in to make this the celebratory, crazy arts time that it is here in the city. So when it started, it was, I think, I don't want to at all speak for Mark, but to me, what I saw was happening was creating the space and the resources and the platform for folks that presenters might not know about otherwise to be coming here into the city and to be showcasing, essentially. But also shows like this that are in this undercurrent, that are more experimental, you can't showcase in the way that we do at the Hilton.
Yeah.
Right? You can't, and everything that, and like the shows that I had now, I've sometimes referred to them as showcases, but like showing is better, or performance. Like it's a full performance, and you can't do a 15-minute excerpt of most things effectively when it's this like experimental work that's about the whole journey. It's totally different than a band being like, here are 3 banger songs that you can hear, and then you can go hear another band. It's totally different.
Oh yeah.
I think that's part of the point, is being able to give the resources, time, space, and platform for these people to do full shows and get people who are here from across the country and across the world, because also there's ISPA after APAP, to be able to say, oh, let me pay attention, and it's here. Let me go to see these things.
Yeah. Sorry. No, the only thing I was saying is that we feel very like the exact same way. I mean, give us an opportunity to see a full length production. I mean, we're going to take that every single time, even if it is a band. I think about everybody has a story in the industry where they saw something that was really great, and then like you realize like, oh, they had a solid 15 minutes. And now they're on stage for 90.
Yeah.
And so we'll take that opportunity every time.
Yeah.
So Josh and I and my colleague Jordan, we went and saw Sunny Jain at Symphony Space. Yeah. And I was aware of Sunny Jain prior, when I was at Quad City Arts, prior to Florida State. We had booked Sunny Jain, and I was very excited to get to work with him. And then I moved to Florida. So I was very jealous when I got to see all the photos of him in the schools and doing this stuff.
Was that Red Barad or Wild Wild East, or?
No, I think it was just him.
Oh, okay.
And
Great.
I think a couple other musicians, and just sort of on a solo thing there.
Cool.
Working residency work in the schools.
Yeah, great.
And heard from the folks there that it went really well, and he was really fantastic. And then so when we saw this on Under the Radar, I was like, I want to see this, because I wanted to see it perform live. Yeah. And it was not what I expected.
Okay, can I ask, like, what did you expect? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so I think, it being part of Under the Radar Festival makes a bit more sense now. Because when I went into it, I expected more of a traditional concert. Just like, he's going to get up there, he's going to do some songs, might do some new stuff, and that's what I expected. For those that didn't see Love Force, what we got was a party. We got, Sunny Jain and the band trying to encourage people to just use the space differently, to feel the music a bit differently. But what I think was sort of the best surprise that entire night is his storytelling. it took us on a journey, and it told us, some history, and, talked about, creating that border in Pakistan, and how like that really was a division that like is still felt today. And, because we don't live in that area, for us, like that's just a boundary, and it's, it's whatever, but it really has like major repercussions to this day, which I thought was maybe fascinating is not the right word, but it was. And he's a really great storyteller. He has this tendency that a lot of artists don't really take advantage of, is letting things live in silence. Like he gives it a long pause. And I think for a lot of folks, they don't understand like how much can happen in that long pause. And he gave it time to breathe, which I thought it was powerful. So I didn't expect all of that. I expected a concert, and what I got was a little bit of theater, a little bit of a party, and obviously you did get a concert because he's a musician. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
I did my best to not go into it with any expectations. I knew who he was, and that's it. And I just tried to go in completely open-minded. I've already found that any time that I go in with an expectation in Under the Radar, it does not go well for me.
That's great. So did you all come to the show separately, or and like decide to go separately, or like it was a conversation and when you were looking at Under the Radar and figuring out how to frame things in this podcast, you're like, ooh, this one.
Yeah, Josh and I, we sort of created a list of shows, and then narrowed down like the ones that made it to both of our lists. Cool. And Sunny Jain was one of those. For me, it was because like I knew who he was, and I was like, oh, this is, and I'll be honest, part of that is because I know that from my experience with Quad City Arts and what we're trying to do at Florida State University, he is a commercially viable product for me. Because I know he did really well in the school's residency wise, and that's where we're doing some of that in Florida State, and so that help move that line.
I'll say the most surprising thing for me was the through line that was created from the establishment of Pakistan to the American Civil Rights Movement to current day, current moment, and how beautifully that was threaded through.
Yeah, totally. And yet you also, even though you got all that history and there was some depressing things to discuss, like I'm assuming you left buoyant.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like that's what's an amazing talent of Sunny. That
we raved about it on the walk back. I mean, just kept talking about the things that we really enjoyed about it, the things that we learned. We haven't talked about this, but there is a level of like what I think some people will feel is silliness, where he has everybody like hum that note in the beginning and sort of close your eyes and like feel that experience in your body. And I'll tell you, like, I'm not that type of person. So like when that was, I was like, but having everybody hum that resonant tone, like it created this sense of calm. And it was like, it helped center everybody in the room. And even like saying that, I'm like, it's so like, it feels a bit silly, but it really like brought everything together. And it was a great experience.
Literally placed everyone on the same wavelength. Quite literally.
Yeah, exactly. Even tone deaf people like me. Totally.
I do want to tell you one quick story. So
I'm gonna try and remember the things that.
So this, when I was like in this moment, I am not a get up on stage person, get in the aisles and dance person. I'm not a dance person at all. I did allow myself, maybe force myself a little bit to move, because I was like, I want to be involved and do that. Both as like an audience member, but also, if this was something that I would bring to my venue, like people are going to look to me if they see me in the audience. So like I need to do those things.
Sure.
But I watched this guy right behind us who, from the onset, was, you could tell that he maybe like felt out of place. He was there by himself. And when Sunny Jain invited people up, like he asked people to move, and I watched this honestly what felt like a shy old man do a little like shuffle and dance like down the aisle, and eventually like later in the show went up on stage, and it was a really like touching moment to see somebody sort of like let themselves go and enjoy that moment all by themselves.
Yeah, even though they weren't ready at the beginning.
Correct.
He warmed him up enough to get there.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and I watched that joy on that man, and that was and I'm sure that happened for a lot of other people in that audience, but like I saw that take place, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you were going to say something.
I had two things I wanted to say. One is I thought it could be helpful to say how I met Sunny.
Yes.
And that may be, I guess, as you were asking about like how I connect with folks, like the story of how I met Sunny is perfect. I have another project I work on called Ocean Filibuster, and I've known those two main artists who are Katie Pearl and Lisa D'Amour. They have a company called Pearl D'Amour for a long time through the work I did in the past, right? I've intersected with them through different other theater companies and everything. Mm-hmm. And so when they started doing Ocean Filibuster, we reconnected. Katie works at Wesleyan, where Sunny was an artist in residence, and someone named Fiona Coffey at Wesleyan, who was doing the programming, connected them for Katie and basically hired Katie to direct Love Force. Mm. She, as someone I talk to all the time, was like, Amanda, I think you should come up and see this show. I think it's really coming together, and I think you'd really like it, and I think it aligns with what you're doing. I was crazy busy, but I looked at my calendar and I was like, okay, I think I can go back and forth the same night, make it happen. And I did. And I felt all these things that you're talking about. You know, I felt I couldn't believe that I was getting up on stage. I was like happy. I was thinking about I learned history. I had things that I was thinking about in my like everyday life from the show. Mm-hmm. And so then she connected Sunny and I, and we went out for coffee. We both live in Brooklyn. And I think for him, the fact that obviously we got along, we discussed the show, we discussed his hopes and dreams and all of that for the project. But the fact that I had this track record with Katie, and then it also, I'll say, didn't hurt that my spouse is a jazz musician, that he knew that it was like, oh, you also understand this jazz world in this way. So that a lot of times it's a bunch of things clicking in place, right? Yeah. And so then we started working together. So that's that track. And then the other thing I wanted to say, when you mentioned that this feels like almost commercially viable, it's true. My projects run the gamut, and some of them, I think they're all accessible to people who don't necessarily know that art form or don't always go to work. Like everything you can get no matter what your past and experience is. But some of them are a little bit more viable for more performing arts centers than others, right? And might feel a little less risky or feel like something that they can more easily be putting in their season. And I feel like, to me, Love Force fits into that world as well. That some of my projects, there's probably only 30 places that they might do it. Some others, they maybe gets up to 60. Sunny, I feel like we're at like 150 places that like should be considering this and looking at it, and maybe a risk for them. And I'm not saying it's going to make money, but it's going to like fill the house in a way that's going to feel great, and people are going to be talking about it for years. For me, it was a project that, you know, as we're shifting our audience to different kinds of works, this is one step in that process. Yeah.
To show them something a little bit different, to show them a concert that's more than a concert. Yeah.
And the terminology that I have been using about this piece is saying it's a musical memoir. Mm-hmm. And I think that those are like two words we understand, right? Even if you've never heard them together before. And by putting them together, you understand, and having seen it, that's like exactly what it is, right? It's this storytelling journey. It's about half music, about half storytelling. And if you love jazz, and if you love, I don't want to say world music or fusion music, but music that goes beyond just jazz. And if you also like love a theatrical experience, I think both of those audiences can get into this work.
Jordan on my team, who saw the show, like one of the things he said afterwards was he was just raving about how incredible each of those musicians are, because he has a music background, plays the saxophone, played jazz, and so he was just talking about like, he's like, wow, he's like, these people have some really good chops. He's like, and he was talking about just how incredible Sunny is as a percussionist.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was like, you know, I saw the show, I was like, they're really good. But like from a technical standpoint, like he sees those things, and I don't, because that's not really my world.
Yeah.
So.
And I think people got, I mean, obviously Sunny's the percussionist in Wild Wild East and Red Barat, but sometimes I think people forget how much of a jazz background and jazz genius he is as well. So it's really, this is a way that he's like showcasing that a little bit more.
So we talked about the commercial viability on that sort of thing. So with that said, do you know where this is heading next? If people wanted to be able to try to catch it, where and when?
Yeah.
Before we get to that, can I ask a couple more like process questions?
Totally.
So you told us that this piece, Love Force, was pretty far into development whenever you came on with it. At that point, how do you then shepherd it to its final point, and how much work is there with the creative aspects of it and yourself from an editing perspective, from a commercial eye perspective, to then shepherd it forward?
Right. And I'll say that those are great questions, because also for me, I come on at different points in the process for projects. So sometimes it is from the beginning, and sometimes it's halfway, or all different. So this, I would say the show is like 80% done after the workshop at Wesleyan. So the first thing when I would talk to Sunny and sat down for coffee at that time was like, well, what do you still want to do? And, make sure we're sort of on the same page about that. And also I had a conversation with Katie, the director, about that too. And we're basically on the same page, where we talked about bringing in a costume consultant and really getting the look of everyone. Not the same, just for people who didn't say, they're not all at all wearing the same thing, but there's unity and cohesion to the colors, to the fits, to different things like that. I mean, they all have their individual personalities and what they're wearing, but at that. And they did things at Wesleyan. There was a great video and lighting designer. She's a teacher up at Wesleyan as well. And, just between schedule and also different, they were trying out different things, and there were some new things that they learned, and some things to adjust and change. And I brought on, and then Sunny interviewed and talked to both the costume designer, who's someone that I'd worked with in two very different other projects, and then to do video and lighting. I'll just say Mika Eubanks is the costume designer, and then Jeanette Yu, who has done things from Broadway to downtown Little Puppet projects, and I've worked with her on a handful of different things throughout the years, and let me just say, puppeteers and people in that world are so inventive, and I'm trying not to say self-sufficient, but I'll just say self-sufficient, and just in the ways that they think of things and have this out-of-the-box way of doing things. So knowing that also about Jeanette, I was excited to see how she would think of things a little bit differently. So she and Sunny and Katie worked together a bunch, especially as we got closer. And so they started with the files from before and really moved them forward, did a bunch of new things. Also, at Wesleyan, they had so many toys to play with in the lighting realm and video. They had 3 different projectors there that we were we have to make this more tour viable. So we'll need moving lights for just about wherever we go, but let's do 6 moving lights, not 20. What are some other things that we can always have in place? How can we have the video also help us so that there's a consistency, because lights are different everywhere. It's only getting worse as technology increases, with lighting plots being different everywhere. So looking at all of those things. So it was, even though it was just the last 20% or so, there was still a lot to do, discuss. We talked, Katie and Sunny continued to do some script development. And then the biggest thing was, next venues and booking the tour and getting our world premiere spot, which was Symphony Space. So I'll say that we are going to, right, you wanted me to wait to say where we were going, but we have some dates in the spring. Okay, so our next spot is Dartmouth at the Hopkins Center, which is really exciting. And then we hop over 2 days later to Pinkerton Academy, also in New Hampshire. And those are folks that had come to see the workshop and were really excited. There was a whole New England contingent who was there because for lots of reasons. And then there's some folks who decided that they wanted to work with Sunny in one of his bands, and then folks who wanted to do this project. And then we did a New England Foundation for the Arts grant to help support it. We are lined up to be going to Boston also in September. I'm hedging what I'm saying there just because we don't have a contract and there's some other things, but they got a grant in Boston and we will most likely be going there in September. Then there's, I would say, about a half dozen other places that we're in discussions with, like in Connecticut, in California, in Oregon, and potentially Arizona. So it's going to have a life over the next bunch of years, for sure. The next two happening in April that like are 100% on the books and scheduled are Dartmouth and Pinkerton.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I was working on all of that while at the same time kind of finalizing the shaping and working on the budget and really figuring that out. Because I'll also just say, so often when people come up with budgets, they're just like, oh, what are we going to pay all of the artists? What's a commission done? And like when you have other designers, in theory, you have to think like, what prep time does my lighting designer need for this? What prep time does the sound engineer need? Do we need a stage manager? Like, what about per diem? What about rehearsals for the band? What about prep time for the director to be looking at the space and spacing things out with Sunny? So there's all of those little things that like slowly add up. And I'm not even talking then about like workers' comp and everything like that. That also is a part of it. It's amazing. Like you can be like, you have 8 people on stage. Why do you need $20,000? Well, actually, we need more than $20,000 because of all these. So it's amazing how quickly it adds up. But yeah, so we dove in a lot with all that too.
Yeah. Because you mentioned the dates and sort of this having a life, if people are interested in exploring that, what's their best option to do that? So
it will always be on Sunny's website, sunnyjain.com. I'm a little slower often to put stuff on my own website, which is alc-arts.com, but I do tend to update my homepage and say recent and upcoming shows that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So those would be the two main places I would say moving forward to really look at. Yeah.
Excellent.
And you can also catch Sunny with other stuff. Wild Wild East and Red Barat are also 2 touring projects where the thing, Sunny is an amazing presence on stage and draws you in and has a way of being intimate despite being in a big space no matter what. Love Force takes that to another level because he's also like sharing a lot of personal things with you as well. But, I would also encourage someone, if they see that he's performing in their city and it's not Love Force, to still go, for sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Can you say who's booking out Love Force? Like if they wanted to book Love Force, who should they contact?
You can definitely contact me. And also Sunny's agent for Wild Wild East is Miles Weinstein, and Miles and I are partnering on this. So like he's got all the information too. Ultimately, once you talk to him, it's coming back to me anyway, because I'm like the one making the budget, looking at the schedule, doing all of that. But like if you already have a relationship with him, yeah, totally talk to him first. But I can easily be found on my website too. Yeah.
So one of the ways that we love to end our podcast or end the time with our guest is we like to take you to a moment back in time. And, so I want to go back to, we'll say when you're just starting your company, you're, entering into that realm. If you could go back and talk to yourself at that moment, what advice would you give your younger self?
So I would say that before I made the total leap, I had some conversations with some agents that were adjacent to what I do or very similar, and producers. Like I met with Linda Brumbuck at Pomegranate Arts. I met with Rena Shakin, who I'd known before from Meredith Monk. And so I was hearing over and over, like, this is harder than you think. And I wish I had really let that sink in. And I'm not saying I would have changed what I do. I do feel like I'm finally at a place having figured out my niche and how to describe it. And having now, even though I'm not like crazy, insanely busy all the time with stuff, have started to have enough of a track record that I feel like I can be saying, hey, like, I know you haven't worked with me before, but here's some folks that you can talk to. Here's some past experiences that I can point to that folks are starting to trust me a little bit more. But I would definitely say, like, no, you should really listen to that. And these people get tons of emails, and just because you think something is excellent, and I'm not, I believe in my taste for sure. I was a theater critic for years, although that was like a past thing. If someone doesn't know me, they have no reason to believe in my taste. And I didn't totally understand that from the beginning. I thought, if I'm just so excited about something and sending you this email talking about how passionate I am, that's going to mean something. But it doesn't if you don't know me.
That's fair. Anything else you want to share, Amanda, before we go?
I just hope that in the long game of this, that what I'm doing will help some folks start to take baby steps towards more risks, both in terms of the presenters and the audience. So that is my long game goal.
I love that. Well, Amanda, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.